All right, my name is Hiram Shelton. This is one of 6 videos for my leadership project. It's my service learning project for Criminal Justice 3020, my administrative class. And I just want to thank the victim advocates from the Utah County Sheriff's Office for allowing me this leadership opportunity. A lot of these slides and videos are actually going to be things I'm sure you guys have talked about and things that you already know, but hopefully we're digging in and finding some new perspectives, finding some things that, at least maybe change your perspective on things or things you haven't quite dived into yet yourselves. And so, this first video is actually on self-awareness, empathy, and their role in victim advocacy. So we have the introduction to self-awareness and empathy. The definition of self-awareness is the understanding one's own emotions, biases, and how they affect others. So the first thing we want for victim advocates is to be looking at yourself first. You can't really help others until you are in the right mindset and in the right place with yourself. It's kind of like the plane analogy. If you're going down, you have to put your own mask on before you can help the next person. So the definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, especially victims. And the importance here is that these qualities allow advocates to connect deeply with victims and create supportive environments. Now, I normally don't just read word for word, but just in case the video can't catch it, I am going to be reading word for word in these presentations. Next slide. So what is self-deception? Self-deception occurs when people fail to see themselves and others clearly, often blaming external factors rather than recognizing their own role. Now, this is very important. As a victim advocate, we need you to be able to see your own biases, to see your own flaws and how you're viewing others. And if you're unable to do that, you're going to run into issues that you think may completely be the other person, when in fact, if you were able to look at yourself first, we could actually solve a lot of those issues. And it's a really difficult thing to do that, but we got to do our best. We have to be looking at ourselves and changing what we can. So an advocate may view a victim as uncooperative without considering how their own behavior might be contributing to the lack of rapport. That's the example I came up with. Next slide here. So in the box thinking. This is viewing others as obstacles, often failing to empathize with their needs. Out of the box thinking, on the other hand, is seeing others as real people with their own needs, emotions, and challenges. So the application here is that advocates who think out of the box are more effective in serving victims because they see them as individuals. One of the more obvious places in this is when we have a male victim. They are far more rare, and because males are almost always are so often the suspect or the offender, it's difficult to have these conversations with men as the victim. It can be difficult how you see them, how you view them, and it's important that we're aware of these biases. Sometimes we can't change these biases, but we at least need to be aware of them and aware of how we're thinking if we're going to be our best in being there for the victim, in talking to them and in seeing them as people. And sometimes being just aware of the bias is enough to really allow us to be out of the box and allow to see people as they are. Next slide. The role of self-awareness in advocacy. So self-reflection, engaging in regular self-reflection, helps advocates recognize their biases and emotional triggers. For example, a self-aware advocate can approach victims with empathy despite personal challenges. It's important here to be thinking about your own life and your own challenges, even when you're in the midst of helping a victim or in the midst of doing work with a victim. Now, it may feel a bit strange to think about yourself when you're working with another, but by doing so, it allows you to actually be there more for a person, asking yourself, am I in the right mindset to be helping this person? Do I have my troubles at home? Do I have my personal troubles uh, in a place where they're not creeping into my work life, where I'm not easily um, easily angered by what someone says because of what's going on, and at least being aware of those things is going to help us in those areas. Cultivating empathy. So empathy in practice, understanding the emotional and psychological state of victims, which helps advocates provide better support. Active listening. This is listening without judgment, showing that you truly care about the victim's experience. And the example here is a victim who feels understood and supported by an empathetic advocate will be more likely to open up. This is huge. As victim advocates, we really have the ability to get the most out of victims. It is so often that police officers do not get the full story simply because victims are scared, they're worried, they don't feel completely safe. But as a victim advocate, we really have the ability here to connect with the victim and to be able to talk to them on a personal level. And we're going to have opportunities to get more of a full story. And so if we're not active listening, if we're not putting our empathy into practice, we're really missing out on being able to get the full picture for the victim and being able to help them and defend them as best as we can. So how self-deception affects advocacy. The impact of self-deception. Self-deception can prevent advocates from understanding victims' true needs, leading to ineffective support. And the example here is that an advocate who fails to recognize their bias toward a particular victim might inadvertently harm the relationship. Again, we're gonna go back to this example where the victim is male. It's just the most obvious. It can happen in other scenarios, but this is just an obvious scenario where it's like we're dealing with offenders who are male so often that it is really easy to kind of to project other people's actions or other scenarios onto the scenario we're dealing with or onto the person that we're talking with. It can be difficult, even if one person looks similar to another person, to kind of project, behavior and thoughts and ideas onto another person that really doesn't deserve that way of those thoughts and feelings. If one person is really hard to deal with and they might just look like a victim, that will make it really difficult to talk openly and to hear this person, just because you might think, if I bring this up, they're probably not going to listen. They look like my sister, my ex-boyfriend, or anyone that suddenly really changes how we view this person. So it's important that we are recognizing it and that we are kind of fighting those feelings within ourselves, because by recognizing those things, it allows us to, again, be open to trying things and having the conversations that might be more difficult. So overcoming biases in advocacy. So the implicit bias, we have all individuals have unconscious biases that can affect how they interact with others. So strategies for overcoming bias are acknowledging the biases and actively working to counteract them. And the example here is an advocate who notices their bias and works to engage victims fairly, regardless of gender or race. So as it says here, sometimes bias is unconscious. Simply having someone look like another person, and you may not even realize it at first. But just just recognizing the bias often will make the biggest difference, or even all the difference that we need is just recognizing that bias, talking to another advocate or a family member that, this person reminds me of someone who is difficult to deal with. And having that conversation allows us to kind of open up, realize what we're doing, and allow us to then go about the situation differently. So the link between empathy and trust. So empathy builds trust. When victims feel understood, they trust their advocates more, which enhances the advocacy process. Again, we have the ability to get more out of victims than police officers. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes police officers are just great at talking with victims, but just about all, I'm not going to say every time, but a lot of times, victims will feel too afraid or still too in the moment to give everything about their story to the police officer. And so it's important that we are building that trust through empathy so that we can get the full story. The example here is that victims are more likely to share critical details when they feel emotionally supported by their advocates. All right, so the recap, key points of self-awareness and empathy. So the recap of our presentation here today is self-awareness and empathy is needed to create a trusting relationship with victims, and practicing out-of-the-box thinking and active listening for effective advocacy. I know these 2 points go together really well. It's simply that we have to be self-aware if we are going to think out of the box and give others the treatment that they deserve. If we're not aware of how we are acting or what's on our minds and what's distracting us, things that could be affecting our biases, if we're not aware of those things, then we're not going to treat people with empathy in the way that they deserve to be treated. Again, I'm really sorry if these are things you already know. I'm sure many of you already know these things. So I hopefully we can still view this and learn from it and continue to kind of be up to date on how we are thinking and get something out of this. So yeah, thanks for watching the first video.